Dr. Vibhuti Sachdev qualified as an architect in 1989 from SPA Delhi, completed her PhD in 1996 from University of London, and has worked as a conservation consultant, writer, and designer. She has taught at the University of Sussex and written 4 books and several articles on the subjects of Jaipur, traditional knowledge systems, Indian cities, and Indian modernities. She has worked and written extensively on the city of Jaipur, focusing on its planning, architecture, and craft traditions. Since publishing these books, Dr. Sachdev has been a consultant on the restoration of the Jal Mahal in Jaipur, was the design curator for the artwork of its pavilions, and the co-curator of the exhibition Painted Pleasure. Her latest book is on the festivals at the Jaipur Court. At Sushant University, she had introduced new programs, various reforms, and innovations in teaching and learning systems at the undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctoral levels. Several outreach programs that forged new relationships with urban authorities and communities are bearing fruit and continue to strengthen the brand of the schools at the university. She is currently working on devising an integrated approach to learning and developing a research ecosystem.
Okay, so this is a quick sketch of certain things, certain ideas that I've pulled together uh, for this talk. It's not a, it's not a complete survey of the Shastric view. There cannot be one, but I just pulled together some thoughts. Urban and the rural dissonance or consonance. The polarities we've already seen that were established, which have a a modernist history to it. Um, Professor Reena talked about it being an oxymoron. Um, I wonder if that is what is happening, whether it is a complete opposite or whether it is something that um, is actually a very interesting space. What is happening today is unprecedented, as any new moment is unprecedented by the very definition of time. But what is happening is really interesting, and I want to kind of just go through a few things. I mean, this idea is well established that the urban bulldozer keeps bulldozing our villages into beating them to shape and modernizing them and urbanizing them. And this is something that is called rural urbanization. Rural urbanization is a process by which rural areas become urbanized. As a process, it has evolved throughout human history, from ancient times to present, under different names and approaches. This evolution has followed two paths: planned rural urbanization and unplanned rural urbanization. So the inevitability of the bulldozer that is coming from the cities and in a way kind of eating up our villages. I wonder if that is what is really happening, and I wonder whether the inevitability is what is perceived by the villages or there's something else. And let's look at what's happening to our cities. And this is what I find very interesting, that there is an urban ruralization happening in our cities. And let's, whenever we talk about the urban rural, the urban villages, we talk about them in a very negative term, in terms of slums, in terms of deprivation, in terms of urban poverty. But there is a great deal of rural wisdom that has crept into the cities. Not even 20 years ago, we would focus on and give priority to walkability, which was much more a rural concept that, and you hear stories of our grandparents saying, oh God, we had to walk to, 2 kilometers to go to school. We had to walk 5 kilometers to go and fetch water. But in the urban areas, we are suddenly very keen to walk. and for no purpose at all, because the water comes from the tap, and we don't need to go and fetch food. We don't need to go to school. School, you go by bus, but just walking has become something that is gaining development privilege. Connectivity is again community living. So the modernist viewpoint of ideal living was this nuclear families who break away from the joint families and come to the cities, two parents both working, two children, this kind of very modern existence is suddenly collapsing. And there is a need for community living, and these communities are being formed in the cities by the day. I mean, and these communities are not bound by blood, but they're bound by certain occupations. And this also kind of, in a way, indicates something that we have done in the past a lot, like mohallas would have similar occupations. And also, very interestingly, what is happening is that these communities are forming as care ecosystems within the cities. So you get, people from all professions, old, young, intergenerational living, assisted living. So this kind of, coming together of housing, which has this care ecosystem, is a sort of a new community living, which we have learned from our rural past, maybe. Walking 15-minute city is a very, very trendy concept that is, exists in the villages. Even our food and lifestyle is changing. We are getting into urban farming. We are more and more keen to know where our food comes from. This is something, again, I mean, 20 years ago, we wouldn't have thought that we'll be growing our own food, also giving importance to the fact that we should know where this bangan comes from. Is it, who's grown it? What has gone into the soil? How much water has it consumed? And how much has it traveled? So all these things that were naturally a part of our parents growing up is now a privileged commodity in the city. So organic farming, urban farming, going to the source of water is again something we are increasingly conscious that water has memory, and that the water coming from the tap is actually has experienced a lot of aggression where it comes from the tap, and the water from the well has a different different essence. Even the cultural wisdom is gaining more traction in the cities than it is in the villages these days. So the idea of the yoga, the Ayurveda, naturopathy, being close to our traditional knowledge systems, the idea of sustainability, recycling, reuse, all these notions of 2 generations ago, which were common practice. Our grandparents, for example, we would remember that they would hardly throw any vegetable. Even the peels of the peas were cooked. Even the, you would remember that chilka of the watermelon makes excellent halwa. But we were not throwing vegetables because we are stingy, miserly people, or we are very, very poor, so we can't, it was because throwing nature's gift to humanity was considered inauspicious. So you won't throw things just because, it's not required. So this consciousness, which was part of our, very sort of a not an urban way of thinking in the 50s and 60s, we would like throw. And even in the 80s and 90s, we were throwing so much, and suddenly we are, conscious of recycling and not throwing. So, and also this is not a new phenomenon. This urban ruralization, which I've coined, is, I came across this work called Urban Farming and Ruralization in the Netherlands in the 13th century. And if you remember, even in our, there was always this longing for the people who were sitting, who were in the urban areas, a longing for the village, as a kind of a nostalgic longing for the village, which was a very modern thing to do, that you miss your village. Alas, the village is gone. Now we're in cities and village is dying. So in a way, kind of we have come a full circle. And I think our cities are going to be the new trendy villages. We are ruralizing our villages. That is my proposition. Let's look at a bit more into the past and see what are some of our texts say. And these are a few things that I've picked up from the texts for this talk, that, gram or a village was never, never kind of an isolated typology with its own culture. A gram or a village was part of several typologies. So the gram was a smallest type of settlement, and the other settlements were kheta, which is part of the agricultural land, kharvat, which is part of a hilly region or could lie in a valley, durga is a fort, nagar is a town, or pura. So these are like, gram is the smallest, and then you go to the larger and the largest, and this is how the smallest unit was, smallest ecosystem was imagined. There are various typologies. That's from my mata also mentioned in my mata is Mangala, is where similar kinds of people live, like only the Brahmins live. Pura was supposed to be a place where the princes and the merchants and the commercial people live. A grama is inhabited by other people, and Matha is where ascetics live. Also, some typologies of settlements were governed by function. So Kevala is, a town only, which is just a settlement. And then you have other functions like a Rajdhani, like a Pattana. And this nomenclature remains in our vocabulary, like Vishakhapatnam is a Pattana, was a Pattana, and Rajdhani and the Pura and the, all these are very much part of our modern living. I want to tell you two stories, since Modi ji recently commented that India is great on stories and high on content. So I thought, let me dig out a couple of stories that are very much part of our culture, and with my limited access, I have access to these stories. There are Buddhist stories, there are Jain stories, there are Sufi stories, and and stories that can only happen when there is a confluence of culture in our country. So these are stories very much specific to our countries, and literary texts are a great repository of stories about cities and settlements that inspire us, that instill the values of inclusivity, diversity, harmony. And in these stories, somehow the urban and the rural merge, and the emphasis in which seems so modern to me, is always on the safety and infrastructure for all citizens. And this is okay, story number 2 comes first. I know. So this is a story when Krishna was moving from Mathura, and there was a threat of bad people who were a threat to the good people. So Krishna thought, okay, let's move to Dwarka, and he calls Vishwakarma and gives him a commission for a new city. And the project brief to Vishwakarma was that make me a city of abundance. Above all, emphasis on safety and infrastructure. This is from Vishwakarma Puran. And Suraksha and Vyavastha, main things. You have this for me. And then there are a lot of descriptions on building typologies, on roads, on facilities, and at least 40 plants are described in the Vishwakarma, which have to be planted in that city, which would be good for the people. The amazing thing was that Dwarkapuri was completed in a very short time, very, very rapidly. And it was ready with all amenities for people of all varnas. And the capital was moved from Mathurapuri to Dwarkapuri. And as it happened in Jaipur as well, which is an 18th century city, not Dwarkapuri, always when a new city is made or new settlement is designed or made, the existing villages come inside it. So in case of Jaipur, Brahmapuri was an existing village. It has a Sami tree, which is a holy tree which was worshipped. it becomes a part of that city, and there is no kind of urgency to array isko flat karke high rise banana, and it wasn't that, it exists as a smaller ecosystem within. So we have to find ways of, I think, not bulldozing villages with this view of rapid urbanization, which is, I think, causing a lot of damage, to finding a way of including these other settlements, other kinds of settlements. And we already know, and maybe we find a solution by densifying our existing cities, because cities are, there is a lot of wasted space, and we can further densify it, and the rural pockets can exist as a different typology. So my last story, my other story, yeah, is of Ayodhya, and this is very interesting because it gives us a glimpse of what is a city, what does it all provide, what does it all mean to people, and this is it's in an episode, Ayodhya Kand, in Ramayana, written by Valmiki. When Dashrath, has died because he's missing his son, he's gone to for Vanvas with Lakshman and Sita, and he can't bear the pain, and he collapses and dies, and so quickly, a meeting is called, urgent meeting to decide karen kya, who's going to run this kingdom, who's going to run this city, which also has villages and all kinds of people. And this led to a discussion among senior advisors to the court on what becomes of a city without an able leadership. This tells us also of the role of an urban environment in people's lives. So urban environment, or an environment of settlement, requires infrastructure, it requires maintenance, it requires somebody to kind of lead it. It can't be left to kind of just keep happening on its own. So what happens to a city when there is no leadership? And in Ramayana, in Ayodhya Kand, it is mentioned that agriculture suffers. There is a breakdown of family. So son separates from father, and wife from husband. So disobedient people like son and wife, not obeying men, will be encouraged not to obey. Economy suffers. So fear and asatya. So fear and lies is what rules the city. If there is no vision, there is no leadership, there is no consolidation. Third thing, no discussions on appropriate and inappropriate behavior. No new gardens are planted. Trees are cut fearlessly. We are seeing this. Peaceful, learned, ascetic people do not participate in long events and are not rewarded. This is a sign of a collapse, urban collapse. Performing arts suffer. Theatre artists and dancers are unhappy. Cultural events are not organized for the progress of society. Disputes remain unsettled. Positive stories are not told. Bejeweled youth do not roam free in city gardens. People do not sleep with their doors open. Traveling with goods and money is unsafe. So this is a scenario of an urban collapse, and it it conjures up pictures of today, doesn't it? Some of the things, and and in the end, what also Ramayana also mentions is that a city is something, a place which provides equity, safety, freedom, cultural patronage, and free expression. Thank you.
In fact, it's been a very hectic day for you. We overstretched all timelines, and all participants, all researchers, all of us have been there together. And in fact, the wisdom that you were talking about on urbanization and rural is a very important consideration, you know. Understanding the basic structure of how things are when there is no regimentation, when there is no administration, when there is no policy, is actually our true nature. These impositions have made a set of forces which are very difficult to overcome, very difficult to trespass and cross. So, in fact, I was trying to understand the whole view very carefully, and very small little nuances of urbanization and villages and khed and these classifications were there. The scales of spaces and the scales of cultivation also differ. So, thank you so much, ma'am, for this session.
So I would just like to make, another thing that I'm now working on is, a center for cultural wisdom. And I think we need to kind of bring out, it's not just enough to do research. I think we need to kind of bring out all this wisdom that is our resource into one place and ready for application into the existing scenarios, or even, to suggest solutions or suggest way forward, or even innovation. I mean, food and textile, it's happening a lot. I mean, we are very, very aware of our cuisine, of our herbs and what it does, and with Ayurveda and in textile
Yes.
as well, but not in architecture and planning.
Not in architecture and planning.
Look at the horrible trees we plant. I mean, for
Correct.
all you know, they might be poisonous. Why can't we plant fruit trees? I mean, it's our, this is a land of fantastic fruit trees. Why
Yeah.
aren't we doing that? And also, I mean, there are many things like this which I think would benefit, and our connection with the animals and ants. We just, any creature we see crawling, we are out with a spray to kill it. I mean, that's a kind of a horrible knee-jerk reaction. So our wisdom is that, that plant or animal or insect is a messenger from nature. What is the message that living being is giving you? It is giving you a message. You don't kill it. You hear the message, and say a cockroach gives you a message that you need to clean your house. You don't need to kind of just kill it. Killing is not going to solve anything. And I think these are the kind of things I think we need to talk about more and bring it out so that people can apply. Thank you for the opportunity, Professor Anand. It was a fantastic day for me as well.
Thank you.